Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the People's Voice with Shabnam Palesa Mohamed on Salam Media. It is Sunday, the 15th of March, 2026, and we have an empowering and informative show for you planned today. Of course, the world stands in the crosshairs of empire, particularly if you live in the global south, but we're also in perhaps the greatest awakening in history, leading to our liberation from empire. We have two very important guests scheduled for today. Our first guest is International Relations Head and Member of Parliament of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Nqobile Mhlongo. Welcome to the People's Voice.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful to have you on. Of course, following you, Nqobile will be the former South African ambassador to the US, Ibrahim Rasool, and we'll also be talking with him about strategies to defend Africa from the violence of empire. But beginning with you, I'm so glad you've made the time to join us. We're talking about Bozell and protecting South Africa against Zio-Imperialism. So you formally called for an urgent parliamentary meeting and written to the CJ to defend the judiciary against Ambassador Bozell's attacks. But given the government's response was very limited, a formal reprimand and the acceptance of his apology, what concrete actions beyond protest do you propose? How does the EFF plan to force the executive to move from issuing statements to taking material actions, such as declaring Bozell persona non grata and rejecting the corporations that he wants to use to infiltrate our country?
Thank you very much. Firstly, as the EFF and as a member of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperations in Parliament, we took the liberty to write to the Portfolio Chairperson, Honorable Supra Mahumapil, a letter to urgently convene a meeting of the Portfolio Committee to, one, discuss diplomatic steps that ought to be taken in response to the undiplomatic and unwelcome remarks that were made by the ambassador of the US into South Africa. Because as the EFF, we believe that which Mr. Bozell said warrants for his immediate expulsion and for him to be declared a persona non grata and for him to leave our soil with immediate effect. Why we are saying that? Because you will recall that our former ambassador into the US, the next guest you have here, Mr. Ibrahim Rasool, was expelled from the US for making undiplomatic remarks. But also, these undiplomatic remarks that were made by Ambassador Bozell, it was not by mistake. It was calculated, it was strategic, and he knew what he was doing. You will know that in that peace news conference, there was the Democratic Alliance, Solidarity Movement, AfriForum, and FF+. Now, all those parties and so-called NGOs have been frequenting the United States of America, begging the White House and the administration of Donald Trump to, one, impose embargoes on South Africa, but number two, for the Donald Trump administration to interfere in the domestic affairs of South Africa. Because they don't agree with the NHI bill, they don't agree with NHI, they don't agree with the Pella bill, they don't agree with the land expropriation bill, and they don't agree with the decision of South Africa government to take the Zionist state of Israel to the ICJ. Now, as the EFF, we think it's very much strategic for the committee to assist the department to take the correct diplomatic stance on this issue of Mr. Bozell. Why? Because we are also not in agreement with what the minister has done, Minister Lamula. Minister Lamula has decided to demarch the ambassador. That for us is neither here nor there, because the demarch is just a reprimand, it's just to call him to order, it's just to give him more information on the issues he raised. There's no need. The US is very advanced. The US has access to information, has access. They know what South Africa stands for. They do these things deliberately. But you will recall that since Mr. Bozell's nomination in 2025, he was clear that he's coming to South Africa to change the stance of South Africa against on our decision to take the Israeli to the ICJ, but also to convince South Africa not to be friends with Iran, to convince South Africa to leave and stop being in solidarity with the people of Palestine, but also to change our domestic affairs when it comes to land expropriation bill. And those are the issues we do not agree to as the economic freedom fighters. Our letter that we wrote to the Chief Justice and the Judiciary is that Mr. Bozell took the platform not only to undermine our domestic affairs, but to rubbish our court. In South Africa, Mr. Bozell knows very well that South African's democracy is a constitutional democracy. Our democracy is based on the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And as such, our judiciary we hold it in high regard. He cannot say that he does not care what our court said. Now, the issue of kill the poor, kill the farm, it was taken to the Human Rights Commission, it was taken to the Supreme Court of Appeal and to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court is the highest court in the land in South Africa. Once they've declared deliver the judgment on the matter, that matter is considered to be final. Therefore, our judiciary cannot be undermined by Bozell. It's not his place as a diplomat in South Africa. He knows that, and then you've got the Minister of International Relations claiming that he issued an apology. Where is that apology? Because when you go to the Twitter account of the US Embassy, Bozell says that he made those remarks on his personal capacity. There's no apology.
There is no
in fact,
apology.
we don't want his apology. It's clear that he made those statements as in his personal capacity. But Mr. Bozell does not have the luxury of speaking anything at his personal capacity. He's in South Africa as an ambassador and ought to act like an ambassador on foreign land. You must know that he's here at the mercy and the approval of the country. And we are not in agreement. You'll recall that February this year, DERCO has accepted and had received his letter of credence. As the EFF was saying that DERCO shouldn't have accepted his letter of credence. Mr. Bozell shouldn't have been in South Africa to begin with. And we shall be taking further actions because we are waiting to hear when will the president be the one at Union Buildings to come and accept the letter of credence, the original letter of credence from Mr. Bozell himself. And as the economic freedom fighters, we shall be there at the Union Buildings at the lawn and protesting against this. In fact, we hope it doesn't come to this because we'll be pressuring the chairperson in Parliament of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations to convene an urgent meeting so that we hold DERCO accountable for the actions of Mr. Bozell.
Comprehensive response there from Nqobile Mhlongo. You know, you've explicitly linked the appointment of Bozell to South Africa's case against the Zionist apartheid state of Israel, describing it as a direct retaliation for our stance. You've also explained how this dynamic manifests on the ground in terms of not just our foreign policy on our allies like Palestine or Iran for that matter, but also how they want to roll back and sabotage domestic laws such as the Expropriation Act. So it does beg the question of why Bozell was allowed into our country in the first place. I want to watch a video next and then talk with you about the independence of our National Prosecuting Authority. This is your colleague at the EFF, Nazir Paulson. Let's take a look.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The National Prosecuting Authority is failing to enforce the regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act, which strictly prohibits South African nationals from providing military assistance to foreign states without authorization. Records from the National Conventional Arms Control Committee confirm that no such authorizations have been granted to South Africans serving in the Israeli Defense Force, yet dozens of South African citizens continue to serve in the Israeli Defense Force with impunity. The evidence is often self-incriminating. This follows years of ignored criminal complaints, including the 2024 complaint against Aaron Bayer, who posted his participation on social media. The 2014 complaint against Dean Samuel Goodson, a decorated IDF soldier, which remains without a prosecutorial decision after more than a decade of delay. The South African Zionist Terrorism Corridor Probe, which collates evidence of unlawful recruitment, financing, and participation in the IDF, to name a few. The NPA silence is no longer a mere oversight. It is an endemic and systemic failure. The South African government warned that naturalized citizens would have their citizenship revoked and that citizens by birth would be arrested upon the return. But these threats remain hot air without a single arrest. This inaction undermines our constitutional democracy
Thank you,
and our
Honourable Member.
credibility
Your
as
time
a
has
champion of
expired.
international law.
The
It is time for
ANC.
the NPA to fulfill its constitutional
ANC.
mandate and to act without fear, favour or prejudice and ensure
Honourable
that the
Member,
laws
your
of the
time
Republic
has
are treated as
expired.
optional.
The ANC.
We are in trouble, Nqobile. In 2009, Israel stole missile tank technology blueprints from South Africa via Denel. There was no prosecution. Now we have a situation where the MPA is failing to prosecute IOF recruits from our own country who are committing acts of genocide in Palestine and perhaps even are involved in genocides, wars, and conflicts in other parts of our world. What is your assessment of the independence of the NPA and what needs to happen to make sure that war criminals are held accountable?
Palesa, this issue of the NPA being reluctant to prosecute these South Africans who are participating in the Zionist apartheid state of Israel's military really is an indictment on our government, and really it's also a reflection on President Ramaphosa. You will remember that the Sixth Parliament took a resolution to cut all diplomatic ties and economic ties with Israel and for the Israeli embassy to close in South Africa. To this day, that sixth parliamentary resolution has not been implemented by Ramaphosa. So we're not surprised that NPA is very reluctant in prosecuting these mercenaries who are portraying themselves and being very proud that they are participating as military forces of the Zionist state of Israel. Like I'm saying, it shows that it's how the state has taken an attitude. Ramaphosa can claim that he does not want to be bullied, but clearly the man is bullied. The man can make a decision. Early this year, we received a report from the Director General of DERCO when we asked why there's no closure of the Israeli embassy in South Africa and why our embassy, the South African embassy in Israel, has not been shut down to this day. And they are paying salaries of close to 400,000 on a monthly basis. He said to us that they are writing some paper to cabinet. They want the buy-in of cabinet. We asked, why do you want the buy-in of cabinet when already parliament has resolved on the matter? Now, what is left is for the president to implement. So as long as the president does not take a decisive a stance on this matter to ensure that South Africa cuts all diplomatic ties with Israel, we shall continue to have an NPA that is also scared to act, and also it borders on the line of the independence and of the judiciary. In South Africa, we like and prefer for our judiciary to be independent, to act without fear and favor, to always follow the the constitution of the republic. But in this matter, it seems that the NPA is unreluctant to act on it. And you've heard when the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development was responding in Parliament herself, she does not have the political will to act. Once the political principal does not have political will to take action, obviously the public servants and the administrators and everybody else below the political principal will also develop that appetite of not being able to act on such important issues. So I think that's mainly our problem. And really, as the EFF, we want to reiterate that the South Africans who are serving in the apartheid Zionist state of Israeli defense ought to have their citizenship revoked and denounced, because that they are not representing our interests. But also, last year, as the economic freedom fighters, we confronted the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture on why does he allow Israeli soldiers to come and participate in the Comrades Marathon in South Africa. He said that there's nothing stopping them. He was very arrogant. So that is the stance of government. Government has taken, the GNU government has decided that they will literally ignore the Sixth Parliament resolution, and they will continue to have business with the apartheid state of Israel. And it's up to us as the EFF to raise these issues, to make society aware of these issues, so that everybody knows what is happening, that Ramaphosa can claim that he does not want to be bullied. He is bullied. He's afraid to take a principled stance on these matters. He's afraid to call out his cabinet members. Some cabinet members have been frequenting the Israel And why? What happens to them? Nothing. Some members of the cabinet, they are fully in support. They speak on any platform given to them that they support Israel. Does Ramaphosa reprimand them? No, he can't reprimand them because these people are receiving money from the apartheid state of Israel, and really the president is being bullied. And if the EFF does not stand up and take a stance on this matter, it's going to be problematic for all of us.
Mhm. I want to squeeze in two more questions before we let you go, Nqobile. And the one is the fact that most of our fuel supply comes from foreign-owned oil companies in our country. You might remember a year or two back, these same companies refused to fuel Russian ships that were participating in a military exercise in our country. What would happen then if we were the subject of a direct kinetic attack by Zio-Imperialism, and these same companies refused to fuel our defense? What needs to be done in this regard?
Firstly, you will know that the EFF since inception, we have been calling that for all our needs and necessities as South Africa or any African state, we ought to look to each other. There is Nigeria here in Africa that we are able to source a big number of fuel from them. Why can't we look to Nigeria? Why can't we look to our African fellow countries to supply some of these goods that South Africa require? Why do we have to always rely on Western foreign powers to get supplies of these things? But also what is important is that we have said as the EFF, we need to go to the global south, look at our partners in the global south, go to our partners in BRICS. Now, you will know that Venezuela has a lot of oil. Why are we not looking into that direction? Why are we not going to our partners in BRICS? Why are we not coming to Africa? Because Nigeria has access to fuel. Also, not only Nigeria, even for our energy security, why are we not ensuring that we solidify the base that the LNG that was discovered in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique and utilize it at our own benefit in collaboration with the countries in Africa? First and foremost, as Africans, we must be able to rely on each other. And these foreign companies that are operating in South Africa, we have said that it is quite important for government to have policies in place so that these companies, if they act against government decisions or they act in a manner that seeks to sabotage the work of government, there ought to be consequences. It can't be business as usual. I remember that story. They were refusing to refuel. They even, because Israel, the then Israeli ambassador even said that Lady R is a ship here in South Africa, is bringing illegal arm from Russia, and accused even South Africa of all manner, even the ambassador of the US in South Africa, accused South Africa of all manner of things. But when you investigate, those things were not there. It was merely a propaganda. What we're advocating for as the EFF is that we ought to look into Africa firstly for any of our needs, whether it's goods and services. We must first approach Africa. When those things are not available in Africa, then we can first explore our BRICS partners and go to the global south. Leave the West alone. The West is an imperialist state. They don't want to serve the interests of Africa. They just want to come to Africa to loot and take our mineral resources and leave us disadvantaged. So we can't always want to rely on the West. That's why that foreign companies that are operating in the country, there must be some set of laws that are in place to safeguard such incidents from happening in future.
Absolutely. Let's try and squeeze one more in, Nqobile. You know, you've been a leading voice challenging what you describe as the US treating South Africa as a satellite state that must surrender its sovereignty. Given that this pressure is coming from the world's sole superpower, what is your strategy for building a coalition, both domestically and internationally, to resist it? And this is beyond the BRICS alignment that is often quite problematic. So what specific diplomatic, economic, and people-to-people alliances should South Africa be forging to protect ourselves against potential kinetic attack, coup, or a false flag?
Now, what South Africa needs to do, needs to first go to Africa. As the EFF, we've previously proposed that through what was adopted in the African Union, the African Free Continental Trade Agreement, needs to be implemented by all. We need to oversee it. We need to ensure firstly that the EU has a legislative authority in the member states of EU, so that firstly we trade amongst each other, we develop foreign policy the African continent. No one, if you want to trade with any of the African countries, you must be able to trade with all of us on the terms that we put into table, so that we don't have states when they need anything, they first run to the West. I will recall, like we were all celebrating when the president of Senegal was elected, a young person. What does he do? First days in office, he runs to the White House with other presidents to beg the White House to move into their country and to come and take resources from their country. First, we need a united Africa that will develop foreign policy of Africa, that will serve the interest of Africans, that will ensure that you can't impose an embargo on Zimbabwe and you want to trade with any of the African states. Either you trade with all of us or you don't trade with all of us. Another thing that South Africa needs to advocate for is a radical transformation of these bodies that don't serve the interest of Africans. You know, I feel sorry for the students who are at universities studying international relations. We have seen with the actions of the US and the apartheid state of Israel that international law was not meant for the US and Israel and their allies. All international laws were designed to suppress other countries. Now you've got the UN that is not transformed. The UN Security Council met and then they condemn Iran that they retaliated against Israeli and US aggression in their country. But there's no report from the UN condemning the behavior of US and Israel. Now that tells you that we need radical transformation of these bodies that don't serve us. If these bodies don't serve us, all of us, we must pull away from it. We must be able to mobilize many countries, and we must never get tired of being the voice of reason. When South Africa started with the case at ICJ against the Zionist state of Israel, we were the only country that took them to court against the genocide they are continuing to perpetuate in Gaza, in Palestine. We're a solo voice. But now, as you can see, a lot of countries are joining on the side of South Africa. The US has come out to show itself who they are, exactly who they are. They've now joined the case, but on the side supporting Israel. Why? There's an international warrant of arrest on Benjamin Netanyahu. Why is it not implemented? It proved my point exactly, that international laws were not meant for Israeli and US. They were meant to suppress the rest of the world and ensure that everyone bows down to the powerhouses that they are. So we should not allow the powerhouses. What we can do is to make sure that our mineral resources, our raw materials, they don't leave Africa as raw materials. The industries of the West are built from the raw materials and the mineral resources of Africa. It should never happen again. We should advocate as South Africa to speak to our African brothers and sisters in Africa to ensure that let's come up with one foreign policy to serve all of us that says that there is no mineral or raw material that leaves Africa as a raw material or as an unprocessed mineral resource. Let these companies that are mining our mineral resources come and establish their headquarters here, come and bring their machinery here in Africa, and these products leave as finished products so that we create jobs for our people, we build our economy that will be able to sustain itself, that will not depend on what happens in the West, that will not depend on the dollar, and we ensure that we have a currency that we use to trade amongst ourselves as Africa. But also, last thing I want to raise that is very important, we must begin to fall in line with the 2025 AU Summit theme that spoke about justice and reparations for African and people of African descent. Where are the reparations that we're getting from these countries that colonize us? What is it that we can do to ensure that we get reparations from these countries? Because as Africa, we're quiet. EU just comes up with a brilliant theme. Does it follow up on it? No. Do the African states follow up on it? No. So we need to follow this theme, make sure that we get reparations from these different countries that have colonized us, so that when they want to trade with us, we can say that when you want to trade with us, you as France, because you colonized us, you as the US, you as the UK, you colonized us. Oh, when you trade with us, because we sell an ounce of gold for this amount, but because it's you, our colonizer, we must get reparations from you. Then we triple the amount, because we must collect reparations from you for the crimes and the genocide and the occupation and the decades of stealing of our resources that we have committed in our continent. And we ought
Nqobile Mhlongo, I'm going to have to invite you back again. Certainly, we have much more to talk about. Thank you very much for joining us today on The People's Voice. Siyabonga.
Siyabonga. Salani kahle.
Well, join us on our next link. We'll be talking to former South African ambassador to the US, Ibrahim Rasool, about strategies to defend Africa from the violence of empire. Don't go anywhere. We'll be